It was 1969 when an 8-year-old kid picked up a Super 8 video camera and couldn't bring himself to put it down, becoming one of the most revered filmmakers on the planet, his rise to the top meteoric. Peter Jackson was born appropriately on Halloween 1961 and grew up in the small Kapiti Coast community of Pukekohe Bay, about 37 kilometres north of Wellington in New Zealand. His parents, Bill Jackson and Joan Ruck, met in New Zealand after separately emigrating there from England in the early 50s. After tying the knot, they bought a small holiday home perched on a Pukekohe Bay clifftop overlooking the sea towards nearby Kapiti Island, where once held the legendary Maori warrior chief Te Raupaha. Arriving late in the marriage, Pete was a much treasured addition, and as an only child the sole focus of all their love, attention and encouragement. His parents had humble backgrounds, with his father working until retirement as paymaster with the Wellington City Council and his mother in a hosiery factory. Opening up his imagination from a young age, his mum would take him for bushwalks, captivating him with stories about trolls in the woods and goblins in the trees. This fueled him as a youngster with a famous 5 sense of adventure. Pete would do crazy things like sneaking out of his bedroom window at 3 in the morning, go tap on his friend's window, and spend an hour together tearing around the neighbourhood on their bicycles, then race back to bed before their parents awoke. Without any sibling rivalry, Pete connected well with the older generation, listening with great interest to stories of his father and friends' wartime adventures. His father having served with the British Army during the Second World War, and a grandfather who he never got to meet was a decorated British soldier during the First World War. Later in life, this was to inspire Peter's interest in war exhibitions, films and World War I aircraft. Television first entered Peter's life in 1965 when, as a 4-year-old, their first TV set was delivered while they'd been on holiday. Arriving home to find a huge cardboard box sitting in the lounge, his dad unpacked what would now be considered a museum piece, an old black and white Philips with just a single channel and 4 legs that had to be screwed on. Pete enjoyed watching old war movies alongside his dad and was a serious comedy fan of Buster Keaton and Monty Python, suiting his dark humour. Growing up, he was a huge fan, as many kids were in the 60s, of Jerry Anderson's hit series Thunderbirds International Rescue. Peter would make copy models of their crafts, falling in love with the model making, storytelling and fantasy. This love grew further when, as a 9-year-old, he watched for the first time the 1930s black and white version of King Kong. Peter was blown away and influenced by this adventure movie and the magic of stop-motion photography, which he wanted to try for himself. Making plasticine models, he experimented creating his own miniature King Kong set. In 1969, a family friend had given his parents a Kodak Super 8 video camera for snapping home movies, but Peter quickly commandeered it and didn't waste any time putting it to work. Attempting to make stop-motion videos of his King Kong set was tricky using his basic camera, which couldn't perform single-frame shots, but he found by flicking the trigger with his finger he could get it down to 3 frames per shot, which would have to do. Marshalling school friends around to make his own backyard war movies was another favourite pastime. Peter wasn't much of a sportsman, more of a geeky kid wearing his signature duffel coat and running around with a camera in his hand. With sport being such an obsessive part of the Kiwi culture, it would become the bane of his life for many years, trying to entice friends away from sports on the weekends to help out with his film shoots. On one occasion, waiting all day with camera in hand only to return home with tears in his eyes when no one had turned up. From early on, Pete loved the special effects in movies, and inspired by King Kong and Planet of the Apes, he had a go at sculpting face masks. Using pocket money to buy latex, he learnt the process of baking masks. Having free rein at home, he'd do this in his mum's oven, but with the ammonia smelling to high heaven, the house would be reeking of it. Of interest during his high school years, Pete was repeatedly turned away from membership to the Kapiti College Students' Film Club, run by someone who Pete described as being a self-perpetuating oligarchy. Undeterred by the snubbing, Pete continued his love of movies with other filmmaking outcasts. As a teenager, he and his friends developed a keen interest in splatter and epic battle movie scenes, especially those involving masses of soldiers, such as in Waterloo. Influenced by the Ray Harryhausen movies, Pete and his mates made their own monsters and models, once making a stop-frame animated short movie, which they entered in a local competition, winning much acclaim, but missing out on the prize for overrunning the time limit. Peter was keen to leave high school as soon as possible. His mind was on getting a job in the film industry and ultimately making movies. After achieving school certificate, he departed from school and started job hunting in 1978 as a 16-year-old. He got his first job interview at the New Zealand Film Unit and was so nervous he took his dad along. But they turned him away. Ironically, some 20 years later, he would end up owning the place. His parents gave him an ultimatum. If you can't find a job, you'll have to go to university. With no film jobs around, he desperately scanned the Evening Post newspaper and he noticed an apprentice photo engraver job going at the newspaper itself. He didn't have a clue what the job was, but it had the word photo in it, so thought that was good enough. After applying, he was relieved to get the job, with a starting wage of just $77 a week. As part of the apprenticeship, he'd have to attend a 12-week course in Auckland, some 700 kilometres away. Before getting on the train, he bought a thick paperback to while away the 12-hour journey. Attracted by the cool artwork on the cover of the book, it was called Lord of the Rings. Mad about movies and filmmaking, especially special effects, he thought as he read the book, damn, this could make a great movie, without any thought that one day he'd be the one. Pete spent several years photo engraving, finding the job boring, but providing him with much needed funds to buy more film to hone his after-hours filmmaking projects. In one of his after-hours filming experiments with a friend near his home, he was lucky to escape serious injury. While attempting a reenactment of a Ray Harryhausen-inspired sword-fighting scene, he was to do a dramatic fall backwards into the water, but hadn't noticed the tide had gone out since arriving. When he fell backwards into shallow water, his spine struck rocks. In pain, he managed to crawl home, and later needed an operation to put things right. Always enthusiastic, any free time was never wasted. While off work recovering for 2 or 3 weeks, he got busy making a full gorilla suit, which would later spark a career-changing series of events. To overcome boredom at his job during the week, Pete was often planning ideas for his weekend filming, which led to several unfinished projects. An avid James Bond fan, one of these was a spoof movie, calling it Coalfinger, playing the hero in his father's dinner suit with bow tie that converted into a flick knife. One bizarre project spread over 2 years involved making a zombie movie called Curse of the Grave Walker, which led to him and a friend digging up some graves of the undead in a local overgrown cemetery, before wisely abandoning the idea and relocating the diggings to his parents' backyard. Peter openly collaborated with friends, and no ideas were off limits. Eventually realising the limitations of his Super 8 camera, he felt he needed to upgrade to a 16mm job with a more professional format. Then one day not long after that, as if on cue, he spotted one in a camera shop window, a Bolex 16mm with a big zoom lens. Trembling with excitement, he knew he could never afford the $2,500 price tag, a small fortune back in the early 80s. His only hope was Mum and Dad. He raced home and begged them for a loan. His staunchest supporters didn't let him down. He got the camera, and not recalling ever having repaid the loan, years later, on the night he won his Oscar for Best Director, he named and thanked his parents, as many did in what had become almost a joke, but no one would have ever known the personal meaning to him. But the new camera did come with its problems, with Pete having to learn new technical skills and fork out lots more in cash for film. Wanting to make something worthwhile on a zero budget, he persuaded friends and workmates with no acting experience to help out. No lucrative contracts here, just a shoe be right and a feed of fish and chips. And what started out in 1983 as a 10-minute short movie mutated into what would become a full-length job, taking 4 years to complete. The movie was humorous and over-the-top splatter, with very little script, but showing off his emerging talent in special effects and camera work. The plot's about a salesman who stumbles across a group of man-eating aliens, but with the help of a special task force, the aliens are taken on to save the world. Changing its name 3 times, they eventually settled on calling it Bad Taste. But the movie which was to launch Peter Jackson's professional filmmaking career came close to being just another unfinished project had it not been for a series of uncanny events. With the movie only half finished, Pete needed financial help to complete it, and he tried repeatedly to get funding from the New Zealand Film Commission, which is a government agency formed to assist with creating and promoting New Zealand films. In spite of his pleas for help, he was repeatedly turned away. Then one day, after wearing his homemade gorilla suit to work as a prank, a journalist decided to run a fun story about it in the newspaper. The chance story caught the eye of a prop buyer for a local TV series running at the time, Wurzel Gummidge Down Under. Impressed by the quality of the gorilla suit, he tracked Pete down and asked him if he was willing to make a few props for them. Pete was surprised when he pulled a wad of cash out of his pocket and gave him $100 for the costume. It was the first time he had made any money from his hobby. He also invited Pete to visit the set. He leapt at the chance and got to meet a bunch of filmmaking professionals. Amongst the group, an attractive young lady caught his eye. She happened to be the scriptwriter for the show, her name, Frances Walsh. The chance meeting with the Gummidge crew would not only connect him with his future partner, but also film editor Jamie Selkirk, later becoming his business partner. In the chance meeting with Jackson, both Walsh and Selkirk would go on to win fame and Oscars in what was coming.